Welcome. Let's start with a karakia. Whakataka te ho te uru, whakataka te ho ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, he ake ane te atakura, he teo, he huka, he hohu, te he Māori ora. Ka pai. We have one apology, I think, today, which is Phil is given his apology ahead of time. No others that I'm aware of. Could have someone move that, please? Thank you, Councillor Epeha. Thank you, Bruce. All those in favour? Any items of extraordinary business or any new conflicts of interest? Anyone not afford? All right. We might move on quickly and just approve the minutes from our last hui, which was the 5th of November. Have someone approve that they're a true and accurate record? Thank you, Sam. Seconder. Thank you, Bruce. All those in favour? Aye. We have our terms of reference there for information, which then brings me on to my verbal update. Verbal update, well, what a pack. I think it might actually be the largest pack we've had for quite some time. So thank you all for being here. For me personally, I want to start off with a thank you for the annual report. It's been a long time coming. It's been a journey both for Audit New Zealand and also our management team. So when we get to that item, I can talk to that in more detail, but I did want to note that I have been on that journey with management, and also I feel part of Audit New Zealand as well. So I just want to commend the team for getting us where we've got to, which is being able to recommend to full council later this week to adopt our annual report. We've also, highlight for me is the first of our 2 independent internal audit reports. That's been a journey as well to get that obviously adopted, to have an internal audit program that's outsourced, and we've got 2 reports that we're going to get to later in our agenda, with the writer of the report being our outsourced provider speaking to those reports. So that's great. That's set us up for success, as so more to come in that. There's also some great work in the risk management space. So for me personally, I feel that been doing a lot of korero over the last couple of years of what good practice looks like, and I think there's a lot going on, isn't there, at the moment, but I think they're coming back to the quantum of our pack today and the quality of our pack today. I think it's actually a lot for management to be proud of and the steps that they've taken. So ka pai to the management team. I know you've been working hard to be able to get this pack today, and I know there's a lot of other stuff going on. So being able to still get there, so that's enough for me. So if someone could move my verbal update, or I can move it. Thank you. Shane. All those in favour? Aye. Rightio, annual report. So yeah, I probably don't need to say too much more on that. Alison, I'll hand it over to you to kind of talk us through. I did actually read every single page of that annual report, but that might be my background of being an external auditor. I actually really enjoy it. So it tells a very good story, but I'll let you take us through. Obviously, we don't have all day to go a page turn of the annual report like we might have done a few years ago, but take us through the kind of key parts of the report. Your covering note kind of does that also, and then we'll also hear from Julia, our auditor. Thanks, Alison.
Thanks, Annalisa. And I think firstly just introducing Neil. For anyone who's not met Neil, Neil's been in the role a couple of months now as Head of Financial Control. So we've got the cover paper for the annual report that I will take as read. And I will hand over to Neil, who can talk through our high-level details of the annual report.
Thanks, Alison. So the annual report basically consists out of 3 sections: the front section, your statement of service performance, and then the financial statements. So attached to the report, we have a copy of the draft letter of expectation, which is from Council to the auditors, which is signed on the day of adoption, on Wednesday the 26th. Then we also have the draft independent auditors report, which gives Audit New Zealand's opinion on the statement of service performance section, as well as the financial statements. And those were attached to the report to be signed on Wednesday. So the first audited section, the statutory requirements, just wanted to clarify that those are based on the LTP 2131. So the LTP 2434 requirements will be reported on for this next financial year, which is financial year ending 30 June 2025. In terms of the financial performance of Council, Council reported a $5 million surplus after tax for the year. It is $17.1 million below budget, but as per section 5.2.1a and b, the majority of the expenses incurred in addition to this year was just to facilitate the additional growth of the district. Those include asset maintenance, expenditures, building levies, insurances to ensure the bigger network, and then revenue was pretty much on budget. Just noting item C there, the other comprehensive revenue, that's accounting treatment only, so it's only revaluation gains. We don't budget for those, and that's why there's a big swing in the other comprehensive
Apologies
revenue.
to interrupt. Can you just move your microphone a little bit closer? I think with the fan, I can't hear it.
Apologies. Is that better? All good. On the balance sheet, those gains in revaluation of assets reflect the majority of the increase in assets, which are $80.5 million higher than budget. And on the liability side, we see a amount of $19.2 million lower than budget, but that's mostly due to lower capital spend. So just to go back to the $5 million surplus, considering additional costs incurred, higher cost of borrowing, increased requirements from the council, management is confident that it was a good result to still reflect a $5 million surplus, and still staying within our net borrowing as a percentage of revenue target of 160%, achieving 89.15%. I think it was a really good result. Any questions on the report?
Questions, comments?
Well, given the fact, Chair, that when I talked to you insisted I read it, so I did, like you did. A couple of quick comments. So we keep you referring in the accounts to the fact that we missed budget by $17.4 million as a result of costs associated with facilitating growth of the population. The reality of it is, though, is that it's more the growth in the business activity associated with the growth, isn't it? Because we could have actually had, Alison, a system that was well capable of sustaining growth. It was just that it was all happening around activities that the council was responsible for administering. So subdivision work, all that kind of stuff, right? Infrastructure work and things like that. So it wasn't the growth in population, it was the growth in council activity. Is that correct?
I think it's, Bruce, it's worth actually noting as well, if we go back to the discussions we'd had throughout the long-term plan, there was an under-budget situation that we did have coming through into this year, where we hadn't recognised a lot of the costs that are part of this annual report. So that does form part of it. The growth is another factor as well. But Neil talked to insurance, utilities and some other things, and also our staff costs from, I think it was the 2022 restructure that are all coming through into this
Yeah.
as well.
We'll probably get to that at a later meeting when we have a deep conversation about your infrastructure required to actually continue to sustain growth. All right? Okay. How are we getting on in terms of the accounts proper? You want to talk about those? Okay. Well, first thing I'd like to say is that this is my first rodeo through with you guys. Is well done in relation to what you've delivered, because it's quite readable. The front end's quite readable, which is always a challenge from the council report, because I'm not entirely sure who the reader is. I just know they're required. So I actually thought they were reasonably well structured. Couple of things though, just in relation to back end, and it's more, it's almost a nonsense really. I mean, we actually offer a value for Cord, which is a 100% owned subsidiary for council reporting purposes, but we consolidate it out on group reporting for group purposes. But the Cord valuation is actually in response probably to a lot of it's in response to a contract we offer them and a margin they make out of council, correct? So it's a DCF council. So we could actually, so I'm wondering the relevance of that in relation to this. Certainly the group accounts are relevant, but because they consolidate out. But would you consider the $41 odd million we value it at fair value?
So throughout the consolidation process, we do back out the
I
profit.
know that. What I was asking is, do you think the value that we attribute to it actually is meaningful from this accounting perspective at council level?
Yes, I would say it is.
You think it is, even with because we do offer them a guaranteed revenue stream with council work, don't we, at a margin?
Well, I mean, if we go back and look at the letter of expectation that we've given to Cord, it's asking them to look at the broader revenue stream, not just for Selwyn District Council, and how they can look at the balance across. So yes, you're right, there is that component of it, but their business is not all Selwyn District Council revenue.
No, I appreciate that. But it underpins the business. So the next question will obviously be, is it the best use of that $42 million? If that's its value.
We could probably talk to that till length and possibly not land on some.
But it is quite a provocative statement when we value it at that kind of level. We're asking the question, because ultimately you look at it and say, well, is it best use of council resources to have that amount of money value tied up in it, or is that valuation not real?
It's based on what information's been given to us, unfortunately.
Yeah. And can I just ask you as well, sorry, with your indulgence, Chair, intangible assets, software acquisition and development, we account for quite a chunk of value there. But most of it appears to me, just from the commentary, to be software that we've modified under software that doesn't belong to us, we've modified under license. Is that right? Or is this actually proprietary software we developed ourselves?
It will be a combination. So we obviously have to treat that as an intangible, going back to the 2018 IFRIC change. So it will be a combination of what we have purchased and some independent stuff that's been configured in-house.
Yeah. Okay. The only reason I ask that is that if somebody withdrew the license from us, we would actually have something valuable there, or is that going to disappear up in smoke?
No, I don't think so. So we've gone through this with Matt, who's our Chief Digital Officer, to get level comfort around what we're recognising on our balance sheet there. So I'm comfortable that that number is true and fit for purpose.
We've still got a chunk of goodwill on the value on the balance sheet as well for Cord, 870,000. Was that the original acquisition cost of the West Coast asset? No? Yes?
I would need to go back and check that one. I'll confirm that back to you.
Okay. Okay. And I've got a whole lot of ring around numbers here, so just bear with me. I A similar sort of commentary, really. It's more of a challenge for you and your council in relation to, this is to you, Sam, but probably to you, Alison, as advisor in relation to the ownership in Orion and the return we're getting for it. So it's a fairly valuable asset, but your dividend yield's 2.9%. Again, it comes down to, because it appears to me the balance sheet's constrained. Our balance sheet is constrained. So if you've got $42 million tied up in Cord and you've got a chunk of money tied up in Orion, and we've actually got growing infrastructure needs, what would you do with it? Sorry, Sharon.
Yeah, no, thanks, Bruce. I'll take that question. So over the last 12 months, Council has developed an investment and disinvestment strategy. We didn't have a framework in place that enabled Council to give due consideration to what opportunities are. So we're in the process of finalising that framework, which will then lead to some strategic conversations about what is the best pathway forward for Council, and that naturally takes into account Orion and it takes into account Cord as well, based off the very things that you're saying. So we didn't have the framework in place. We now have the framework in place, which will lead to opportunity conversations.
Thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Bruce. Who else is? Any other questions? Okay, I have a few. I don't have, just getting my notes from they've all hidden and diligent. I'm sure there's a way to get a list of them, but anyway.
Oh, hang on. One other
still
thing.
going?
Sorry, Chair. My mistake. We've got some forestry assets. No mention of any carbon associated with those forestry assets. Are they registered?
I can confirm that with you. I haven't been directly involved in that, but in terms of the disclosures we make in the annual report, we also tie that back down to the LTP, but also due to carbon-related disclosures.
Yeah.
If you disclose anything on that, it will need to go through the audit process as well.
Okay. I noticed we've only got 95 hectares, but the reality of it is that, well, if they are registered, we'll be sequestering a little bit of carbon, and I know that if we're going through a decarbonisation program, that actually is quite valuable to us. I'm assuming we are decarbonising. We're making an attempt to, yes?
Yeah. Thank you, Bruce. And again, we have a governance committee, of which there is climate change, and Nicole, I'll invite you to, if you want to put anything in there, but there are some resilience and sustainability plans that will sit with that governance committee, and that will be across the organisation and all other aspects related to the organisation. So I'll use Cord as an example. In our letter of expectation, we were very clear about the sustainability and carbon credits, etc., etc. So, Nicole, is there anything more you'd want to add?
I think you've covered it off. It's definitely a focus of council on those regards.
If I can just add to that response, we have a number of very small forestry assets. It's not so that number. The total number is not held in one or two blocks. It's in the tens, if not more, and following the 2013 wins, there was a big discussion about whether we should hold them, sell them, replant them, and in the end the decision was made to replant them because of the liability on council if we didn't, because they were included in carbon calculations.
I mean, if they're at the sort of mixed stage, it could be 60, 70,000 tonnes of carbon in there. There's always a residual when you're faced with carbon accounting. It doesn't matter how hard you try to decarbonise, you'll always have a residual you'll need to deal with. And if you've got your own carbon, you won't have to buy it. And a purchase of that kind of number will run into the millions. So I would encourage you guys to think about how you account for it.
Thanks, Bruce. Very comprehensive review of the annual report and accounts. Thank you. I've got a few comments and questions, so I will just move through them. Some of them are... so maybe if you... There's probably only a few questions, so maybe you jot the questions down and then we can just wrap it up at the end so you don't feel like you... I did have a question around developer contributions versus vested assets. I understand the difference between the two, but developer contributions were obviously above budget, I think, but vested assets were down. So maybe just give us a little bit of context. Is it a timing thing? I know they're different things. I know one's cash and one's an asset that we recognise in the P&L, but just I would have thought there might have been some alignment or between the two. So that was my first question. Overall, I think the annual report and the commentary, it tells a good story, and that's the purpose of the annual report, is being able to deliver to our community that we have actually delivered on our the expectations on our projects and also performance. So it's kind of, for me, it's telling the story, but also are we performing in the expectations of our key stakeholders. So I think the story is there. I think from 4 or 5 years ago when I first came onto this committee, I think it's much better. For me, personally, I've always been very keen around our telling the story around our major projects, and I think we do that really well. Maybe not I think we do it well, but there's still opportunity for improvement. And I think, and I've jotted it down in a few parts, so this is a lessons learnt for next year, I think. It's great we've got those projects there. I think we kind of tell a story about 4 or 5 of them. For me, it would be great if we could have some KPIs in there and just really pull out the benefit. What were the benefits of these projects? And it is there in the subtle text, but actually, what were the benefits? Have these benefits been realised? Almost, it's a presentation thing. And also, and you won't be surprised about this comment, is health and safety. So we've done so much great mahi in the health and safety space, but we don't tell a big story about it in our annual report. I think the first time we get to it is there is commentary on one of the pages about a new GM health and safety. But I think in, like on page 100 under the performance highlights, we've said these are all the major projects that have been delivered in the year. And we've also talked about, we've done front and centre about 3 or 4 other projects. There it would have been a great opportunity to tell our health and safety story or the journey that we're going on, because the annual report's quite light on that. So whether health and safety is a good news story or a lessons learnt story, I think we should be telling it every year. A minor thing, but I was wondering about the page 61, the KPI on, this is quite granular, but on cemeteries. I've noticed it was a negative KPI, and so not relating to cemeteries, but just the understanding of why we would use a KPI of being negative, i.e. the number of complaints. So I wasn't sure about that one. Service performance expectations, I think, tells a really good story. It's really nice and clear. Also, what's really clear, which I always like for someone that kind of pops in and out of a committee and is not on council, and I think it's a good story to our community, is that page on how your rates were spent, which is kind of page 53. I think that's really clear. I know we've had that for a while, but service performance measures, page 58, it was good. Page 60, what did I have? Done that one. Just bear with me as I... page 108. 16. Sorry, I was trying to be tech savvy this quarter by using the online notes tool. It's dragging.
Madam Chair, can I just make a general comment about KPIs while you're scrolling?
Yeah.
Just noting the negative one. So for the recent long-term plan, we have overhauled the key performance indicators generally across the organisation, because we had KPIs that were just weren't particularly meaningful. And so working with the councillors, we have significantly changed future KPIs that they are meaningful and measurable and actually tell a story. So, but recognising that what you're reading now is KPIs from before.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Second question after your first question. This was my understanding of looking at the obviously our way of kind of above budget of operating expenses and also personnel expenses, because the uplift in personnel expenses when looking at the additional headcount, I'm assuming, because this is June, we've got to remember that this annual report is June 2024, so they must have been fairly senior roles, or there's a whole lot of other stuff that goes in those personnel costs, because when I did the rough maths on increase in headcount to that number, that was quite high.
Do you want to?
And I think I'm almost. Borrowing cash flow. Increased or page 171. I've got a comment that says increased or aged, and apologies, my diligence dragging. Rates receivable. So actual 2024, 4 mil. Actual 2023, 3 mil. So I just wanted to understand, is that just a timing, or have we got a collectability concern there? So that was third question, and I'm almost done, so bear with me. I will write my questions down on paper next time rather than relying on rating change. Actually, why don't you start with those 3 questions and I'll see if any of these other ones pop up. So I think the first one was the vested assets versus developer contributions.
Sure. So maybe just for some of the other committee members, if you don't mind, development contributions are invoiced, and it is paid in cash, whereas vested assets are assets constructed and paid for by developers, transferred to council's ownership, and then maintained and operated by council. So we have to recognise the revenue and the asset, but there's no cash received. It's really difficult to phase or time the budget for the development contributions and the vested assets, as we cannot influence the timing of the transfer of the assets. So what we found was there was, yes, an increase in development contribution activity, but with regards to developers actually finalizing those projects and handing those assets over, those were slower than originally budgeted for. Like I said, it is just really difficult to get your timing accurate in the budget because you don't have any influence over that. Is there anything you want to add? No? All good. With regards to page 61, the target was set at 45%. The actual result was 58%. So it was just put in brackets to show the actual result. It's not a negative. With regards to that, did you want to cover headcount?
I'll talk to the personnel bit. So on page 164 in Diligent, and I think, Annalisa, back to your question around what is the mix. So we've got on the banding, on page 164, so you can see the mix of the salary levels between year on year. But I think it's worth noting in there, and again, it's on that same page, in the comments made earlier just around the long-term plan, whereas some of the information that was factored through in the previous restructure had not been included in the budget as well. So some of the costs we're seeing coming through is adding to the budget gap that we've got. So there's a change in mix of the headcount. There's also the living wage component that's come into the mix as well, and a number of other factors. I think Sharon wanted to add something as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Alison. And what I would say is that we had flagged this with council, so there's no surprises here in terms of the restructure paper that took place, the the new rules that came in that weren't fully budgeted. So we've been having open and honest conversations across the year through different periods to recognise that there were costs that were going to be come to fruition that hadn't initially been included in budget. So it should be no surprise to any of the councillors.
That was all from me. Thank you. I think in relation to the Nicole.
Actually, it's from the bottom.
You gotta go.
Sorry. Oh, well, I'll jump in ahead of you two. Now, just to clarify, any sort of mistakes that we've picked up will just feed through by email, just like words. I'm not going to go through those. I've had someone else asking me that as well. It's
Generally, in the recommendation there is it is put for the CFO to be able to make some minor amendments. So if you could get those through to us, as long as they are minor, not material. If it's something that you think is material, needs to be discussed here.
Yeah, no, not material. Thank you for that clarification.
Have you got any other questions, Kobe?
Just so on page 222 of diligent, so we've got the. I just want an understanding of what we've done here. So the first line we took that we've got, we had a $10 million term deposit that matured during the year and was not reinvested. So what did we? Did that just sit then in a normal bank account, or what do we do with things like that? That probably sounds like a strange question, but I've been someone who's not an accountant. I'm just interested because it's a large amount of money.
Right. Sure. So the term deposit was like a savings account where you generate interest on. That was used in October last year to repay debt. The interesting phase we're currently in is we're actually at the moment gaining more interest on our current accounts than we would from a term deposit. So very interesting times.
Thank you.
Shane.
Aye.
Sam, sorry. I know.
E te whare atu nei tēnā koe, e hoa mā tēnā rā tātou katoa, remihi ana ki a koutou, Madam Chair, Neil, na mahara mai, Alison, kia ora. First of all, I'd like to thank you for all of the work that's been put in and all of the staff that have had a difficult and challenging year. I respect all of the work that you've managed to achieve through all of the difficulties and challenges, and we've spoken about legacy in the past. So I often think about annual reports, and often it's quite easy to dive straight into the quantitative measures, but as with the council, it's also about the qualitative. So I can appreciate the story that's told up front, and that's really important for as an elected member, governance for our community to understand easily, and I see that reflected in the report. I was just reflecting on some of the comments that were made earlier and pulling out some of the numbers and that type of thing. Do you, having produced this report and as a governor, do you currently feel supported in your role to be able to achieve what you have here within your means? And where else could you see support being given to the team to achieve better result, not better or easier, make life easier, qualitative results.
Thanks, Shane. So I think, obviously I introduced Neil earlier, and I've introduced Becca in the past. So we have changed the structure in the finance team. We've split it down into key areas: operational, external reporting, which includes this, which sets the team up for success around what channels of reporting we're looking like. In the past, we had one individual in that role. And I think that's why we've brought the new resource in, recognising there is quite a big time pressure on people. So we have changed the structure. Thanks for your question.
Thank you. I'm happy to move the recommendations on the board.
Sharon.
Sorry, I just want to add into addition to that, is that not only is it about personnel, and Alison's done a really good job in terms of splitting the team and recognising what we need to look like going into the future. I think it's well documented around our systems and processes. And, we were delighted when Council provided some support in the LTP to make some digital investment. That is a significant challenge for our teams to be able to do their business across the organisation. So we're really pleased that we got some funding into the LTP. And that is certainly assisting us to getting us to where we need to be. But I would envisage that probably in the next few years, once we've started to get some of the basic systems, processes and IT in place, that there will need to be a further conversation at future LTPs.
Kia ora, Sam.
Yeah, I quite like annual plans for the reflection on things done in the past. I feel like as a council, we're always thinking about what needs to happen next year and what needs to happen in 5 years' time and what's our 30-year infrastructure plan, and that's all important stuff, but we're only able to do that based on what we've delivered to date, and this, now is quite a wee while ago we're looking at. But yeah, thank you for pulling my memory back to the stuff that's been done well for our community. I'm not sure if the auditors are going to be part of this questions around how this process has gone, because to me the thing is that we're here now in March, and we had some timeframes that we had hoped to meet ahead of now, and so yeah, great work, and I do like where we're at. But just thinking about next year, how do we make sure that this current financial year's annual report is done this side of Christmas? Preferably this side of October. And you've talked to Alison about the changes within the organisation. Do you think we're going to be able to track to meet, initial timeframes on that, or are we just looking for incremental improvement this year, and over the next 2 or 3 we'll see some shifts?
I think there's a couple of different parts in there, Sam. So the first question is, will we meet our statutory reporting timelines? Yes, we've already started the planning. We will always have some of our systems challenges, as Sharon alluded to. We're trying to incrementally change our systems to bring them up to where they need to be. That's not going to be complete in the next 12 months. That's a long journey. But as far as the annual report for June 2025, yes, we are anticipating having that completed within the statutory timelines. The other thing I was just going to add is, once we've covered our questions, I will invite Julian and his team to talk to the report as well, and obviously just noting, thanking Audit New Zealand for their time.
Ka pai. Joe, sorry, Bruce.
I sort of have I finished all the questions on the annual report, but one of the observations I have, and it might go more to council, I think, Sam, and it talks a little bit to you, Shane, and your comments, Sam. As a first-time reader of these accounts, they were easy to read, but they tended to respond to expectations in the long-term plan. And I thought there was possibly a step that you might want to discuss beforehand, which is the direction you're trying to take the Selwyn area, because the LTP responds to those sort of desires. If you clarified that, it might make it easier for people to understand why certain decisions were made, about why you didn't do some things and did do others. So if you're in the future, Sharon, Alison, you sort of talked about what the vision was. Therefore, the vision sort of talks to 4 or 5 things, and those 4 or 5 things have weightings, and that's why we've done lots here and not much here, and you get that point. So I read it around, you had a desire around the LTP, but I just couldn't quite reach into that longer term view. And I thought maybe if you're going to improve on what is quite a readable set of accounts, is you do that. Because as you say, you spend quite a bit of time thinking about it at council. This is your opportunity to express those conversations in an annual review.
Sure.
I think it's a really good reflection for us to have. And until 6 months ago, we didn't have a formal strategy paper, which is now Future Selwyn, which can actually speak to those things. Before, it was kind of just some agreed general direction that council would have, and generally went well. But now we can actually speak to that. As much as the annual report does need to report against the things we told our community would do, it's a bit of the why. Like, why is all this happening, and why is the waiting happening in these places? So, yeah, thank you.
Before we look to moving the annual report, Julian, would you like to make any comments? We have had audit only pre this, however. Before I kind of offer the floor to Julian from Audit New Zealand, I would like to say thank you to Julian at this opportunity, because I will, unfortunately can't make full council later this week. So thank you to Julian for this year, but also the previous 6 years, because Julian will be rotating off Selwyn's audit from 2025. So this year was challenging, and I know that, as an ex-auditor, I know what it's like to complete an audit under normal BAU, as opposed to when you have additional sector pressures that we've had. And so yeah, thank you very much to you and Monique and the rest of your team, and for your service to us for the last 6 years. But yeah, ka pai and kia ora. But over to you for any comments, final comments before we look to move.
I'll go and sit further up, don't worry.
Cheap seat.
I hope it's not the cheap seat.
Thank you very much for your kind words, Annalisa. 6 years. 6 years have been and gone in a flash. I've done 2 LTP rounds for council. They were not easy projects to deal with. There are many challenges. So I'm pretty happy to have been associated with council's work, along with doing the annual report work for council, and also meeting various people. It's quite a pleasure to work with everybody. Specifically about the 2024, yes, we are pretty late, but we are nearly there. I would like to say we are within 10 meters. So hopefully Wednesday, barring any big earthquakes, we will get a sign off. Perhaps just to give assurance to the committee, they were big issues we informed council about through our audit plan that we say we will deal with in the course of the audit. We have completed all of those things. There were issues, but we will report on those more comprehensively following the conclusion of the audit. So the purpose really is to give assurance to the committee to be able to recommend to council that the audit report is good to go for adoption on Wednesday. And perhaps everybody here already knows, but just a reminder to be sure to adopt your annual report with our audit report, not after, with our audit report. So we'll do a little deliberate exchange on Wednesday with the statement of responsibility and the wrap letter, and then we will provide the audit report. Good? Yeah. Thank you.
Questions, comments? Thank you, Julian.
You go, Sam.
Sam.
If it's Julian, just to acknowledge your work. I mean, when you came and started,
I was a young man then.
the hair colours changed over that time. No, but thank you for the work that you've put into helping our council meet its obligations to our community, but also just be a good organisation and corporate citizen. And we do that through partnership, and partnering with Audit is a key part of it. We'll always have our tussles about the cost and the time of things and different parts, but it's people like you who support the work that goes into ensuring that large public organisations like ourselves can be responsible with the public money that we're entrusted with. So thank you.
Yep. Just, Madam Chair, thanks. Just echoing the sentiments of Sam, actually. Julian, thank you very much for your time. I also will be rotating right out after 6 years as well. So I've appreciated your knowledge and expertise in the area and your guidance of council through this period of time. So all the best. Thank you.
All right, Alison, I think we need a drum roll. You ready? All right. So we are looking to, Audit and Risk Committee are looking for the 30 June 2024 that we receive the draft letter of representation. We received the draft independent auditor's report that I think was sent separately via email. We recommend to Council on Wednesday to adopt the draft annual report for the year ending 30 June 2024. And we also, between Monday and Wednesday, delegate to the Chief Financial Officer the authority to make any alterations of minor effect to correct minor errors to the draft annual report. Could I please have a mover? Shane, you do that?
Before we do that, just one thing on the letter of rep, right? Normally it's good governance for the governors to receive a back-to-back representation letter from management.
Yep, so we've seen the draft.
Yeah. So just recognising that as it is signed, you would probably expect your team to be doing the same thing to council, not us to council. That's all. Other than that.
All those in favour? Aye. Cup aye. Now, apologies, I missed our action register. So can we just quickly whip back to the action register on tab 3? Just quickly move through these items, anything that can be pushed to agenda items. We have closed the building stock inspection.
Sorry, Madam Chair. It was closed on the basis that the report was attached for the February meeting, which was put to one side. So Bob behind me would actually give a little bit of a verbal update, and we'll make sure that the report comes to the next.
I think something has been emailed, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's even better.
Treasury report's been aligned to the long-term plan. The internal audit program, that will be covered off when Deloitte present. Health, safety and wellbeing, closed. That was the exploring initiatives to encourage the EAP usage. And health, safety and wellbeing again, the staff to report back on the process for electing contract and management providers. That was discussed in, so is that one still open, Steve?
Yeah, we've been doing a bit of work on that, Madam Chair, and the team will be able to provide a bit more of an update on this in our paper.
Yeah, there was quite a bit in their report on that.
Yeah.
And terms of reference is closed. I think there wasn't another page. Was it just one? Oh, there was another page. Oh, that's all closed. Okay. So I might actually, apologies, get someone to move that and second it again. Sam, Bruce, all those in favour? Rightio. Steve, Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just, again, this is a bit of a note on the work that the team have been undertaking since the last Audit and Risk Committee meeting. A significant amount of work, both in terms of bringing our Audit and Risk program to life, and certainly congratulate the teams that have been involved in providing information today. It's an organisation-wide effort, and I think hopefully the fruits of our labour are starting to see through better reports to our governors about how this organisation is tracking. There's two parts to my report. Take it as read, but the two parts where got a bit more active engagement. I'm going to throw to Tim Mason and Murray just to come and have a quick chat about the progress and the work that has been undertaken recently around the consultation around our local water done well. They could just give an overview of some of the things that they've been identifying, finding, some of the things that are driving us. So I'll pass over to Tim and to Murray.
Thanks, Steve, and good afternoon, committee. I'm conscious that deliberations are slated for later this week, so this information is offered with that in mind in terms of making sure that we don't seek to influence the decision makers ahead of their meeting on Wednesday. Deliberations will lead to a decision by Council on the 2nd of April to either proceed with a water services CCO or retain an in-house model. There have been a number of pieces of work that have been occurring simultaneously to provide the best opportunity to meet the deadline of 1 July startup if the decision to proceed is made. Those include the consultation, which I'll ask Tim to talk to shortly, which you may have seen information about out and about in the media recently around the district. But the other is also about endeavouring to set up, without expending too much effort and resource, the ability for a platform for the organisation to be stood up after the 2nd of April should that decision be made. Clearly there are some legislative contexts and frameworks that are important as we start to think about what this might look like. The Water Services Preliminary Arrangement Act clearly sets out the framework that the government expects in relation to the delivery of water services. And Bill number 3, which is still, I think, just finishing select committee, clearly contemplates that CCOs would be the norm and not the exception. So government and our advisors have signalled what they think the future will look like. That, of course, is subject to the decision that this council makes on the 2nd of April. In addition, there's quite a bit of additional regulatory change that we're likely to be seeing coming down the pipe with water services, and that will provide the opportunity for this organisation and other councils around the country to, of course, to quite seriously consider the importance of the investment that they make in water services for their districts. There are a number of discussion points that have come out through the consultation, and we had a session on that last week, so perhaps, Tim, I might just throw to you to provide the committee with the highlights of that process, then I'm happy to answer questions after that.
Thanks, Murray. Look, I don't have the details of the consultation in front of me, but I can let you know that we've had around over 400 submissions. We have spent considerable time looking at those submissions and theming them up, and the content of that will be included as part of the deliberations on Wednesday. There is a detailed section in the deliberations paper which speaks to those themes and obviously has comments from staff in response to that. So there will be an opportunity on Wednesday to see those themes and to have a in detailed discussion around what those themes are and what they mean. So probably not much more to say other than that at this point, Murray, given there'll be a fair bit of discussion around that on Wednesday.
Thanks, Tim. Through the chair, happy to take questions.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for that update. I guess before we kick into questions, kind of echoing what you were saying, Murray, we don't want to kind of preempt the corridor that's going to happen on Wednesday, but I think it's good for myself and Bruce as independents who will not be part of that discussion on Wednesday to, I guess, have some corridor or some questions around what the remit of this committee is about. And we do have, the Audit and Risk Committee does have a big chunk in its terms of reference around risk. So I won't ask any questions yet, but I'm keen to understand where you think, Mari, around the risks and opportunities of both options are, as it relates to what our mandate within a audit and risk committee is. But I'll let others ask questions first. But maybe if we can kind of keep our korero to the purpose of what this committee is, without jumping into the discussion that will happen on Wednesday. So, fellow colleagues, any questions relating to risk or Sam?
Yeah, can I say I just support that approach. I think it's dangerous for Nicole and Shane and I to offer commentary on this when we have got deliberations coming up, but real purpose to hear from both of our independent appointees to this committee to get your expertise and guidance on what you think the right answer is, because you're not involved in that future decision making, but we need to take on board all of the expertise that we've got. And so, yeah, Bruce and Lisa, I'm really keen to hear, as it relates to risk in particular, and that also, as you said, Lisa, has an opportunity attached to it. What do you read as the right answer for Selwyn District Council?
Okay, thank you, Sam. I can only look, given the fact that I have not been in any way involved in the conversations to date, Murray and Tim, and nor have I really had an opportunity to have a good look at the framework for the decision and how it's going. I can make some observations, and it only relates to the fact that I've had a very long career, maybe and good, bad and indifferent, but in my career I have seen a number of decisions taken by many organisations to decentralise significant developing asset classes. And then I've seen decisions made to centralise some of those decision-making processes over time. And in most circumstances, you can see benefits of both, okay? But the reality of it is that so business and organisations and life in general has a rhythm, and there are benefits to be gained, if done well, for decentralising the activities associated with a sensitive asset that requires some level of concentration. And those benefits normally are that you gain a level of concentration and expertise by a decision-making group that enables the strategic advancement of that. And I've often seen significant changes to the benefit of society. And a good example of that potentially is the one that we're currently seeing at the moment, is that I was part of a long time ago, the original conversations that saw the decentralisation of the science institutes in New Zealand to the CRIs from the old DSIR. And some of the outcomes associated with that were quite beneficial to society, not in the least in crop and food and places like that, where they got real momentum around the development of our horticultural industry. But over time, you end up in a position later, and you're seeing now the discussions around a more centralised approach to it, because the cost gets duplicated and activity gets duplicated, and you start to lose momentum around the purpose. At the moment, you're talking about an asset class here which is dealing with some fairly sensitive issues associated with the environment, the delivery of service, the funding of that service, a significant amount of investment required. There is some benefit, or quite a bit of benefit strategically, from considering that separately with a group of people that are tasked by looking at it. How do I put this sensitively? I'll just say intra-council, taking a view from a governance perspective that transcends the term potentially of the council members associated with the business. So take a more longer term view of it. So, and that way you can manage risk, the stop-start risk, and maintain some level of continuity in it. There is always a risk, if it's done badly, that you end up in a position where strategically you don't align the outcome, the desire of the shareholder with the momentum of the business. So, but those are manageable risks. But the structural risks to start with can be quite advantageous, and that's only an observation I would make from my experience over 35, 40 years of business. Okay, so keep that in mind. But if you do, if you can appoint the right people and get in the right area and get the right SCI in place and get the right funding streams in place, there are some opportunities that will become apparent.
Thanks, Bruce. That's pretty comprehensive. I don't have too much more to add to that. I mean, my thought process when, obviously we've been following this for some time around all of New Zealand and all councils going through a similar korero. And like Bruce, I feel there's definite benefits in that independent commercial type skill set in a separate board and a separate governance and a secretary, if it's done well. As I said, if it's not done well, then it could cause us a whole lot of cost and a whole lot of hurt. And also the other, I guess, key attribute, I guess, to that that path is that intergenerational, long-term kind of thinking. So, does the setup of an independent body force you or support you in thinking more longer term and intergenerational and that one water strategy? When reading through the consultation document, the other arguments sort of around costing and funding, and the time to set up, I think you can almost argue on both sides, can't you? And I think until we actually start down that path, we'll see which way you actually flip the coin, which one will be more beneficial. The funding one, I think, and the way the capital actually moves and the assets move, time will tell. But for me, the key benefit I can see is that independent commercial governance kind of advice, if done well. But like always, for me it's about the and Bruce and I are independent. We have to be independent. We can't tell you which way to sit. But for me, it's really understanding the risks and the benefits to both models. And
there's probably one other thing, Chair, that I could probably contribute from a recent experience. Is for my crimes, I'm on the board of Central Plains Water, and I'm also a board member of a generation company that has a lot to do with water resource. Obviously, water is an issue that is becoming more and more strategic, and it also has a significant amount of interaction around its long-term consenting obligations to tangata whenua, and the separation of that conversation and getting the right governance group in place and the right relationships in place for the long term as opposed to a shorter term is quite important. It does occur to me that council has an opportunity to embed in the potentially in the constitution or the long-term SCI an opportunity to be more collaborative. And there could also be, and I'm not being, this is quite provocative, but it is kind of something you might want to throw into the mix. You could actually manage risk around this by offering a lemon of ownership opportunity, which is not available to most community assets, which I believe is actually kind of demonstrates a good faith in relation to it. So those sorts of, I know that those sorts of opportunities are already being explored in other organisations that have water access and water right and water opportunity. So you could manage risk differently and you could manage opportunity differently by thinking about it in a different organisation. It's quite relevant. Okay. Oh, look, it's a really provocative statement because you throw that out in the community and immediately creates a conversation which is quite provocative. But the reality of it is that these are long-term assets that have an impact on the very lives of everybody that participates with them, and everybody should participate. And if you have a look what's going on in the High Court at the moment, we're having a High Court fight that probably should never have been, but the reality of it is this is an opportunity to do something a little differently and move ahead of that conversation by demonstrating something which could ease a lot of the tension in society by doing it properly. That could be a little bit of ownership. That could be that's obviously in the governance area and all sorts of things. Okay, you get it right.
Thanks, Bruce, and through you, Chair. Points noted. I think there's a couple of things that are probably relevant to this conversation. Very early on, since my involvement, we've been speaking with the local rūnaka, so Taumutu and Tuariri. They are both supportive of the approach that we're taking in terms of a considered, sensible approach to an intergenerational view of water and what that means. They've also identified from their perspective that it's about quality and quantity, not a commercial return. So they are looking to make sure that if there is any surplus, then it's reinvested into the long-term quality of the water assets. And thirdly, the Act in its current state precludes ownership other than by councils. But from a governance perspective, we are certainly building in and embedding further the partnership that exists between Taumutu and Tuariri.
Oh, look, ownership can be expressed in a number of different ways, as you know, Murray. And, that's but what I'm really talking about is a shared responsibility, to long-term future. Certainly I know that the consenting process for a number of different organisations that I'm involved with involves a deep consultation with iwi and the impact that has. And if there's an outcome which benefits both, then that's a shared ownership model, isn't it?
Thanks, Bruce. Did you want to talk to other items in your report?
No, thank you. Thank you for coming in, Murray, as well, just for that update. Take the rest of the report as read. I've got my new head of people here that can talk to the dashboard if there are any questions on that, but I'm open up to any other questions on my report.
Questions, comments? I was looking at Nicole I think she might have Oh, yeah.
So it's including, so I've got questions on the exit survey summary stuff, so that's page.
Cool, so I'll welcome to the table Kylie Hansen.
Kia ora.
Are you able to say, so everyone who leaves, do they get an exit interview, or is that an optional?
We provide the opportunity on exit to complete a survey for our people. So this is just the responses we get back from that survey.
So do you know the percentage who agree to do the exit survey?
I don't have that with me, but I can certainly find that out. But as you can see, the numbers, the turnover is actually quite low. I think in this period we had about 37 staff leave, so the population of completing it is quite small.
Sorry, I'm just looking at my... So I've got one of the themes is frustration with systems/processes. So we've been doing IT upgrades. Do we see that that work that we're doing will actually help in this space?
I'll take that. We've been really clear that we have a finite amount of money to invest. We've had to prioritise where the investment goes initially, and realistically it's a 5-year journey. And so, for example, we have prioritised financial hygiene and infrastructure immediately, which means that there are other areas of the organisation which are going to have to wait. So we've been really open with staff around that it's a 5-year journey. We've got this amount of money, and so not everything's going to be able to happen at once. So we're not going to be able to satisfy absolutely everybody's desires to see the IT upgrade or digital upgrade in their area. So there will continue to be an element of frustration in different pockets of the organisation as we step through a logical prioritised investment with digital services.
Thank you.
There's no other questions or comments?
Sorry, just one from me,
sorry,
Madam Chair.
Shane.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you very much for the report and the transparency. It's great to see the transparency and obviously the culture that comes along with that. And also kudos on managing annual leave as a liability in the books. It's great to see that graph in there and that it's being managed. Thank you.
Sam, do you have
Yeah, just I was looking at the same piece that Nicole was around the exit survey somewhere. I thought it was really interesting just looking at how, and obviously not everyone wants to give feedback as they leave, so that I understand that too. The ones that have the strongest feedback, there's two that stand out around the job description, not necessarily reflecting the job itself, and then also performance feedback while in the job. The two sort of sit underneath, beside each other on the graph that's here. And yeah, I was interested in, are there some particular steps that we're taking around addressing those? And some of this probably comes down to people doing the due diligence about a job coming in as well, so it's not all one side of things. But yeah, just interested in how you take this type of feedback and then, do we do anything with it? And what parts do we attack first? Because we probably can't do it all.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Sam. So about 2 years ago, the people team led a whole program of reviewing all of the job descriptions to ensure that they were current at that point in time, and it took about 9 to 10 months to complete that piece of work, and they got mostly through the organisation. I think what we're probably reflecting as an organisation is the pace and the growth at which our community is growing is also reflected in the pace and growth of the complexity of some of our jobs. And so what might have been the job 2 years ago, we do see that there is a bit of a variation. And so that is also noted in our risk management report around our resource planning as one of those risks that as an organisation we are starting to come to grips with the need to do a little bit more and a little bit better. In terms of one of the areas where we are putting a lot of focus in on is around our leadership development piece with our frontline leaders right through to our executives, to make sure that our leaders are getting the right support to have the right sorts of performance conversations, to provide regular and consistent feedback, and in doing that in a way that links it straight up to future Selwyn and brings it down to our 30-year infrastructure strategy, down to our long-term plan, to our annual plans, to our individual work plans, and then to the individual goals and objectives of that person. So we are working on a progress of shifting our organisation into that framework. It's taken a bit of time, and obviously we've got a bit of growth going on at the moment and some interesting other challenging conversations. So we're managing that with some very busy people.
Thank you. Okay, can I please have someone? Oh, Sharon.
I've got just one quick, while you were talking, this occurred to me, Steve. Given it's a bit of an old war story, but when an organisation is dynamically changing and dynamically moving, like this one is, sometimes trying to framework something too much actually is an inhibitor to growth, and training people to think dynamically and shift is a better beneficial outcome for an organisation that's trying to grow. When you see people leaving because the job wasn't as described, sometimes the conversation may be better framed around the fact that maybe those people weren't suited to the dynamicism of it. That's not what I signed up for. And what you're really looking for is a whole lot of people that love that opportunity to shift, move and grow, take on more responsibility and do other things. And that's kind of maybe what you're looking for in Selwyn at the moment. And rather than trying to frame it, you should be trying to train that kind of, for that teaming and moving and developing and growing conversation. It's only a thought, otherwise you really are going to end up in the wrong place with the wrong people.
Yeah, thanks. Look, I think Steve kind of touched on that. I've been in the organisation 18 months now. It's not the same organisation, and it continues to evolve. And with that, what we constantly find ourselves needing is a different skill set coming into the organisation. And I suppose one of our greatest challenges is keeping a pace with the continued need of a different skill set, and how we support staff who've been with us for a while to also move with us as the scope and the dynamic of the organisation shifts. It's a real tricksy balance.
Yeah, just on that, if you think things are changing now, wait a moment, because with the rate of change in the tech sector and AI and things like that, what we're doing today is not what we're going to be doing tomorrow, and how we're doing it is going to change significantly. Productivity lift has been extraordinary in those sorts of areas that have embraced it. If you've got a group of people that are prepared to experiment change around a purpose, you'll have a really good outcome. But you will lose people along the way, and unfortunately it's probably going to be people in my age group that you're going to lose along the way, because the youth will embrace it faster, but we all should be trying to, because it is moving so fast.
Okay, can I have someone please move the Executive Director's report? Thank you, Nicole, and Bruce second. All those in favour? Thank you. Health, safety and wellbeing.
Right, so I'd like to introduce another new team member of mine, John Knight, and his team, Wayne and Tracy. So they're going to walk us through our quarterly, not quite quarterly on this one, health, safety and wellbeing report. John, firstly, welcome. And yeah, just run us through the key points. We've also got our guest from HEB here who's going to also talk into a particular item, and Wayne will introduce our colleagues from HEB. Thank you. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. I'll take the Health and Safety Wellbeing Report as read. There are 5 key items I'd just like to highlight. The first one being the update on the external review recommendations. There has been significant work progressing these pieces of the foundational work in the HSL Global Report, and a draft work plan has been developed, and it serves to implement those recommendations moving forward in this year. Also, as part of that, our health, safety and wellbeing training framework is being developed, and we are going to build on that and enhance our capability in health, safety and wellbeing. We are also looking at clarifying roles and responsibilities of the overlapping health and safety wellbeing functions. It's a draft framework and is in development. We are also in the position of reviewing and updating our investigation procedure and policy, and will be presented to the Audit and Risk Committee once it has been finalised for information. Before passing on to Mr. Wayne Stark, one point is around the Ports of Auckland prosecution. We have paid careful attention to and considered our current culture in light of the Ports of Auckland prosecution. In response to that, we'll be focusing on promoting 5 key actions for officers of a PCBU. Those are to personally and proactively acquire and maintain knowledge, to understand work as imagined versus work as done, ensure there is sufficient investment in critical control management going forward, to verify the competence of people who have health and safety critical control responsibilities, and to carry out effective monitoring and review of that process. Those are the 5 key areas that I think was good to note. And going forward, I would like to pass on to Mr. Stack to talk to the health and safety section of this report.
Thank you, John. Just following on from what John said about the Ports of Auckland and the building on the health and safety leadership. One of the new initiatives that we are doing at the moment with that is the walkarounds with the ELT members and councillors. So that follows on from those key points that he just mentioned, those 5 key points, where it's finding out how work is actually being done, not as imagined. So from that, we've had a positive feedback from those people conducting those visits and also from the staff who are receiving them. So, and as a result of them, we've had a couple of improvements that have come through from that. That follows on with the critical risk management program. So again, with the senior leadership and working with improvements there, we've had 3 critical risk teams. We've had 3 workshops for the teams: psychological safety, driving, and working in and around water. And so we will have 3 more critical risk groups will be conducting their workshops within the next 3 to 4 months. We also have a new initiative, which is the GIS location of interest layer system, which is aimed at those people working out in the field. And so what we'll have, it's a map layer system. So when our staff are going out into the field, it'll be a change in culture for us. Part of the procedure will be that they will check on this system to identify any locations of interest which have some safety significance to that. So it's a flag system that will be in place and will be managed by managers. So once we get that past ELT, that system will be up and running. The risk registers, we're working with the risk manager in relation to getting our risk registers up and running, which is an organisational wide program. So our focus will be on working with the heads of department to identify or update their risk registers, make sure that they're still relevant, and what improvements we can make to them. With our health and safety management system, a couple of key incidents we want to mention. One of the critical risks that we have is psychological safety. In November, we had 2 members of our Parks and Reserves team who were at the Glen Tunnel motor camp, where they were involved in discovery of a deceased person who was living in the campground, a permanent resident. And so we've made sure that it's a very unusual situation. This doesn't happen very often. So we've made sure that we've provided those staff members with some counselling to help them through that. And the second one, we had a critical risk, which is a lone worker, which our parking warden was assaulted recently. A minor assault, but nevertheless assaulted. So we have zero tolerance for that. The police were involved with that and dealt with that matter. The outcome from that is that we are arranging extra training for those staff who work out in the field and in a regulatory manner, so that we're having something specific for them, dealing with the way that they approach the public and extract themselves from situations that that become unsafe. So that we'll be working with OPSEC Security Solutions with that, so we're conducting those workshops. The contractor assurance, we've been working with the Capital Works team. They've had, late last year, we had a number of cable strikes. Unfortunately, no one was hurt with them, but we'll have Lee Hortler, the South Island Operational Manager for HEB, to talk about how HEB have dealt with the last incident and the improvements that they have made with safety for staff in an effort to prevent occurrences happening again. Since that incident, part of the walking around sites, some of our ELT members have actually been to been to the HEB work site, and we've had some positive feedback from them in regards to the improvements that they've made to prevent these incidents happening again. I'll just pass you over to Tracy, who will talk about our wellbeing initiatives.
So following on what John was mentioning about the HSE Global recommendations, so we're looking at the wellbeing strategy being more focused on psychosocial risks, and we work together as a team, whereas we had 2 strategies in the past. We'll make sure that our health, safety and wellbeing strategy is all aligned into one, so it's a lot easier to use and understand. Hopefully we can get the results of this in a draft presentation for the next meeting, which I think is May, so for recommendations. I think you mentioned earlier about the EAP program. We have now signed up with TELUS Health, which we think is a real positive step, more proactive program than what we had with our previous provider. But over the next few months, we'll be looking at making sure that as we transition from one health EAP provider to the other, that staff are at the focus on making sure that the support. So I think we finished the contract with EAP October, and we've already started with TELUS, so we hope to transition that without anybody missing out on any support. Our EAP stats and Talk It Out stats increased considerably at the end of last quarter. We went from 51 engagements the previous quarter to 83 at the end of last year, which at that time of year we probably do expect to see an increase in numbers because of the workload and people trying to get finished before Christmas. But it is great to know that staff are actually reaching out for help. So, caring customer interaction workshops, we're hoping to commence that again soon. We've held off for this first quarter because everybody's been extremely busy. But with 18 events recorded in Vault, we think it's something we need to pick up sooner rather than later. We've had 3 child welfare concerns, 2 psychological welfare concerns and 13 incidents of aggression. So it's definitely something we need to look for, making sure our staff are supported and trained. 5 members of the people team successfully completed a Good Yarn training. When did we do that? In February. We spent 2 days with Good Yarn. So we're now qualified facilitators, and we'll present this program across the whole of council, which will increase our mental health awareness and literacy, which I think will, We've chosen this model because it's peer support delivered, and we know that that works. We've had a success with the Talk It Out program, and I think keeping it in-house, what's specific to our needs and our people's needs, makes it more relatable for training and stuff. So that's the wellbeing report.
Goodbye, thank you. Nicole.
You're right, Shane, that I go first.
Yep.
Are you right?
So thanks for the report. Just a couple of questions. So the lone worker who got struck with the builder's plaster, were they wearing body cameras? Was it recorded?
Yes, but they turned their back when they were walking away from the incident, so the camera could not record. They were struck from behind. I actually don't think the intention was to strike our employee, our staff member, but I think it was a consequence of frustration.
Because leading on to my next question is about your body camera survey results. So I see so you've got these ones who are issued with the body cam, ones who have access to a body cam and ones that don't have use of the body cam. So the ones that said that they don't have use of the body cam, are they not able to book out one of the ones that would be available? Is there not some system on they can do that, or?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
So I think it's maybe a communication breakdown.
Okay, that's what I just wanted to check, because it didn't make sense to me if it was in our organisation, unless they were in off-site somewhere else, that they couldn't use the body cameras, because we want to make sure our staff is safe. Yeah, will feel safe. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy, Wayne, and welcome, John. I appreciate the report and the culture that you certainly are contributing to in keeping our people safe. The plaster incident, do we, in particular instances like this, find the root cause and then follow up to alleviate before it potentially can get that way? That data, is that captured?
Yes, it is. And so that's, as a result of that, that's the training. We identified that perhaps we need to get some extra training for those people specific to the roles that they do.
Thank you. Just secondly, you mentioned GIS and the utilisation of. Are you working with particular contractors or any contractors around enabling or widening the use of GIS?
We're just doing it in-house with our GIS team.
Yep. And thirdly, I guess the culture that we create by wearing of safety for our staff, for the team, by wearing the cameras, have we yet, or will we be likely to a convictable offence through the use of the footage, and further along, I guess, create a culture within our district that it isn't appropriate because of a conviction that will happen through our people wearing the cameras?
Yes, we've already had that.
You have? Okay.
With the same, with our parking warden.
Okay.
So we were able to capture some evidence that was passed on to the police and the prosecution as a result of that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Wayne, I think it'd be right now to invite Lee to come in from HEB to come up and join the table and just to run through the progress that HEB's made since the incident last year. Welcome, Lee.
Good afternoon, team. Thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you all. I take it as read you've all seen the exec summary, so perhaps I'll run through sort of highlights and then move into questions. So in September last year, we had a situation with a low voltage cable being struck whilst our vehicles were spreading metal on a rehabilitation site. That was the third instance in 18 months. 2 out of those 3 incidents were a touch, not bringing cables down, but nevertheless it was striking of the cables. So in all 3 instances, they were deemed high potential incidents for us, or hypo, as we call them, which are notifiable to WorkSafe. So we went through the process there and thoroughly investigated those particular incidents, and all of which go through to our senior executive for sign-off because of the gravity of the situation. The findings of all 3 differed slightly. The first instance, there was inadequate identification of the overhead service. The second, we had a subcontracted vehicle turn up to site that wasn't inducted, so they didn't know our way of doing things. And the third, we had a situation where the site changed, and we had a truck turn up who wasn't adequately briefed. So overall, the findings, in summary, there were people aspects to it, and there was also organisational learnings, as we find with most of and all the investigations we undertake. And there's a big reliance on the lowest hierarchy of controls, that being the PPE or the administrative, rather than engineering the control out or ideally eliminating. So over the past 12 months, our organisation, similar to John's point actually around Littleton, we moved and have reassessed our safety in regards to critical risk to critical controls. So we've undertaken a process. We've gone through and identified, we have our critical risks, but then we've workshopped and engaged with our staff around the sticky things. Sticky meaning stuff that can kill you. Getting the workforce involved through workshops and identifying the controls that we can put in place that will enable us to fail safely. So we've gone through that process. The Energies is about to be rolled out in the next sort of 2 to 3 weeks. So 6 months on, it was great to hear that positive feedback from your silos. We call them senior leadership observation walks. We're seeing better consistency, but we've also been trialling and have implemented a number of engineering controls. We, about a year or so ago, introduced one of the first ejector trucks here in Selwyn. To say that it's worked wonderfully would be lying. It was a new technology, and it's a little problematic. But we've tried that. We've tried more recently a thing called a slippery deck. I've got to be careful how I say that. Slippery deck. That's sort of a Teflon-lined, not a Teflon, well, a coating that's put on the deck of the truck, which changes the friction of the material, meaning that you don't have to lift the deck as high. So we've actually installed that on 3 of our units, and we're seeing some really, really positive results there. One of the improvements we're going to do there, we need to look at doing is removing the 3rd stage to the tipping deck, because there's 3 stages to a ram. So there's still the ability for the operator to lift it all the way up. So we're at early stages, but seeing really good results there. Ultimately, if we can eliminate the need to lift our deck as high, we're unlikely to hit it, right? The other piece of work that we've been doing and trialling is they come up with all sorts of interesting names. A trout river deck, which is essentially a conveyor, a little bit like a fert spreading truck with a running conveyor for our chip sealing trucks. To chip seal to enable us to keep our decks down. Yeah, so that's sort of where we've got to. It's a bit of a ramble, sorry. But do you have any questions?
Any additional questions on the incidents part before I have some comments on the general report? Dan?
Yep, just a question around, I guess, the cultural aspect of the way people take health and safety for themselves and their co-workers within the organisation. You've sort of talked to some particular projects or things where you've seen some change, or you've tried to design in some change. But what about the people aspect of people expecting to have these conversations and extra chats, extra inductions, like a couple of the things that seemed like they were just missed when a subcontractor came in or someone new came into the space. Can you just talk about some cultural change? Yeah, so yes, we're building a better work pack to roll through these particular critical controls. We've updated our packs and briefing packs. In a number of situations, these were processes that already existed, but we've given them some vigour, and we've put measures around competency on them as well. One of the big changes in our approach too is assurance. So making sure that we check. In this instance, we've had 3 strikes in 18 months, which is unacceptable. There's a bit of a narrative there about how many times we're lifting our decks, moving so much material. It's like check the number of times that validate that it was right, so that we can actually see a true reflection on things rather than counting the number of occurrences. And a really big piece around engaging. Involving them in the creation of this merchandise, I call it, to really get that culture. We also have lead measures we take too, so we're all, as leaders and supervisors, have a number of engagements, much like you were talking to, where we focus on those things. We also champion near misses as well. We look for the lead measure, so really celebrate success, so really build and celebrate people to get some positive recognition, which I've seen over the last sort of 5 years since we've started leaning into lead. We seem to get a lot more buy-in from teams. Yep.
Goodbye. Thank you. A couple of things from me on the report. Welcome, John. I was reflecting on this report in the weekend, going from where it was. I'm sure those that were with me 5-6 years ago when we were delivering an amazing amount of major projects, large, complex, risky projects, and where our health and safety reporting is now is, it'd be interesting to see offline what your commentary is around where we're at and the maturity of where we're at, because there's, as you know, there's always room for improvement when it comes to health, safety and wellbeing. My background in Kōrero is I always, as I guess an audit and risk committee chair, I always want to know about critical risks. I'm very passionate about psychosocial safety and wellbeing. And in this space, in this environment of what the mahi of this organisation does, no surprises around contractor management, because contractor management is really hard and overlapping PCBU duties. So, the report covers all of that, so which is great, but I know there's always, room for improvement. When a couple of things I picked up on your kōrero, which was fantastic, was, and I haven't heard a lot of this previously, is around hypo. So, we always need to be very mindful of that, is what was the potential harm. Yes, we only fell over and sprained an ankle, but actually we were 5 metres away from. So great that you are talking about that, and great that that's in the incident report. I do have a question, and it might be a management question, management CE Steve question, just as a reminder as the escalation point when we do have an incident in real time. So coming back to our terms and reference, I know that we have health and safety in there as a reporting, but when there is an incident, what is the escalation through to audit and risk and council? So I'm just obviously wanting reassurance that we're not waiting 3 months to hear about a, not near miss, but something that was whether it was either an MTI or just what is the escalation again for where it would come within a tight frame to council or us?
Usually as Chief Executive, if it's highlighted to me, I generally send a text out to councillors in the first instance, and I think I've included you in a previous text to say that an email will be coming and that something has occurred, and keep everybody looped in governance-wise from that perspective.
Perfect. And an ICAM, do we have that defined by scale, or is that a judgment when we would do a ICAM?
We would get an ICAM investigation. It's a judgment call. Certainly, if we were looking at a notifiable event, we would get an independent investigator to come in, and we've done that in the past.
Thank you. But no, well, I'm excited, John, for you to be here, and excited to see where the reporting in Kōrero. Oh, sorry, one last thing for you, and I guess it's my support to your role. I sit on a few other boards, and I guess it's around officers' duties, and so my support to you is always reach out to me if you need to, but just understanding and making sure that, and making it clear the expectation of this committee, that officers, which is management, which is the chief executive, is that those kind of L&D programs, the site visits, the work that you need them to do is an expectation of this committee and also of ourselves. I mean, I sit on a couple of other boards where for every hui I have to go into Board Pro or Diligent and log what work I have done, in that month or in that quarter. I have to do that myself. I don't rely on a health and safety team to do that. As an officer, I have to. So I'm interested to see, we don't need to cover it today, but just maybe next time you can just reiterate the expectations on officers from management to councillors, whether there's KPIs, whether there's a certain number of visits we all have to do, and then what the monitoring of that is. And if you do need my support as chair going forward to make sure that we do meet those KPIs, then reach out. But we can cover that sort of next time. But thank you, that's great.
Thank you.
So on that, can I please have someone move Health, Safety and Wellbeing Report? Nicole, thank you. Seconder, Shane, all those in favour? All right. Yeah, I do, because I'm busting. Actually, can we just, we're 2 hours in, we're probably over halfway, but can we just have a 5-minute quick break, if that's okay, for those of us that need to use the whare? Deloitte. Great for you to be here. Great for us to have some internal audit reports in front of us. Sonia, do you want to introduce?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Deloitte. This is our first internal audit from the programme, so it's great that we can present the first report to you here today. Just to give an update on the process that we've been through. So Deloitte carried out the fieldwork and drafting the report, and they've worked closely with management to review the recommendations and review the validity of all the findings, and management have agreed the recommendations, and we'll be working on covering those in the next LTP cycle for most of them. So I'll pass you over to David and Cassia, who will talk to their report. Thank you.
Sorry, Dave, I probably should have said, although you and I have had korero, given this is our first internal report, my fellow colleagues agree, but maybe you can just give us, I guess, just remind us of what the objectives were of the actual audit, and then maybe just talk us through the high, kind of a moderate findings, and then we can take any questions. Great.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, so we had 3 control objectives that we were seeking to form a conclusion on. You can see them in paragraph 1.4 on page 337. So I think you need to think of it as a report in 2 halves. It's a really significant piece of work, involved an awful lot of effort on our part, given the nature of the matters we were asked to review. Think of it as the first half of the report being those first 2 control objectives, so operating expenditure is classified and funded in compliance with the revenue policy, and costs are allocated to targeted and general rates, and debt is allocated to expenditure in line with the revenue policy. And then the second half of the report is about looking at some key systems and controls as far as development contributions were concerned. So I'll deal with each half in turn. I do want to note management's overall comment on paragraph 1.8, where it's good to see the commitment to continuous improvement being committed to paper. I think it's really important, given the nature of some of these findings, that this committee is regularly updated on management's progress in dealing with those recommendations. But I just wanted to say that. We've given an overall conclusion for those first 2. We call it a 2 out of 5, informal/inadequate controls. There are 9 findings on the revenue and financing policy, 2 high, 3 moderate, 3 low, and 1 process improvement. I'll briefly, is it the high and the moderate, Madam Chair, or just the high findings?
Maybe just the highs,
Yep.
but we can ask questions on anything in the report.
You know, it's important to note that as far as this first high finding is concerned, yes, it's not a good position to be in for an internal audit report to be talking about funding your operating expenditure through debt, but it is important to note that this was a known issue. Management did bring this to our attention, and the first high finding does corroborate their conclusions that OPEX has exceeded total funding available, with that gap being funded by debt. We've provided some historical context on page 338 in the table and the 2 graphs, where you can see that gap, particularly on that first graph on the left. The gap's particularly big in 21, 22 and 23, 24. Management are taking steps to address this to reduce that gap through the increased rate rises. The second high finding is a legislative breach in that the rates resolution and the rates presented in the LTP do not match. The detail of that finding is on page 349 under finding 4.3, and you'll see the specifics that do not match. I wouldn't consider particularly material, a couple of definitions and 1 small difference in terms of dollar limits. But the fact is, it is a legislative breach, so that's why we felt it should have been rated as high. So those are the 2 high findings.
Actually, before we go to questions, Alison, were you the sponsor of this report? Do you want to add comments before?
Yeah, I think, I'll talk to the first one, which is the funding of OPEX through debt. So, this was a conversation that was sort of triggered from the long-term plan when we were looking at the sort of funding mechanisms and how we had been able to afford everything with a 6%. And put quite crudely, with a little bit of reverse engineering, which recognised there was a funding shortfall, and how the actual borrowings are smoothed. And the smoothing of the borrowings in itself is not a problem, but it's making sure that the borrowings, in keeping with a revenue and finance policy, are linked to capital projects. There is also the timing aspect there as well, which is featured within here, but maybe not necessarily front and centre, and it's not a criticism of Deloitte at all, but there is timing aspects. So we've got projects funded by development contributions. You've also got a little bit of a lag in time between those monies coming through, borrowings taking place, and when OPEX is hitting as well. So there's always that phasing and timing aspect. But certainly going back to first and foremost, there was a large funding shortfall in the 21-31 long-term plan. As Dave alluded to, we have addressed that through our rates increase up to where we are just now. But there's further work to do to make sure our borrowings are in keeping with what is outlined in our revenue and financing policy.
Questions? Comments? None? Bruce, I know you want to.
No, I'm going to be very positive here and say I look forward to management's commentary and the performance improvement opportunities that may arrive, and potentially working our way through it and getting a better outcome next time. But recognising that there are a number of dynamics going on in a rapidly growing organisation. There's always a challenge, isn't there, between allowing expenditure to occur ahead of the curve to ensure that you can continue to grow and you can continue to operate. And there's never an understanding as to how that's going to happen and when that's going to happen either, Chair, but I do think that we shouldn't probably want to make a habit of it, of exceeding our policy. The policy is in place for a reason. So that would just mean necessarily, Alison, making sure that council you don't allow your council to spend the incremental bit that you need to manage accordingly. That would probably go to you too, Sam, a little bit, but that's about the only comment I choose to make in this particular environment. So we'll see when you do your next one, David, how well we've done in terms of understanding it and doing better.
Sharon?
Yeah, I just want to add in, I think Alison will back me up. This is related to some legacy issues. And I think that as a council, we had some really open conversations. I'm really perversely pleased because through some of the reverse engineering and actually us moving towards that transparency, we can have these open conversations about what has been and where we intend to see moving into the future. So, and Bruce, with regards to management improving moving forward, I think the very fact that David and I advised that actually management highlighted this, and I think what that is a result of a group of new people coming in with fresh eyes around how we do our business.
I think there's always a good opportunity to get these things early in your tenure on the table because
so you've
got runway.
We've got it loud and proud on the table. So I'm really confident around how my exec team are doing their business going forward.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the legacy comment as well. That's
Sam?
Yeah, thank you for the work, and particularly the graphs on that page 234, because they just re-emphasise to me, and I remember well the conversations we had here about setting rates in that year. Nicole, you probably do as well, and this feeling that the rates level was being set too low for what was really required, knowing the inflationary costs that councils were faced at the time and not wanting to set the rate actually at that level. In the end, it was set where it was, and that's proven to be too low for what was actually going to be expended. And I hear what Sharon and the team are saying around, different advice at the time, different people in the organisation at the time, and we're moving on from this. But I want to thank the staff for seeing it and highlighting it now in this manner, and it reflects what some of us at the time were thinking too. So thank you.
Just on that, any infrastructure organisation like this one is always going to reach a point where you will have a conversation around affordability and capability, and then your decision-making protocols, your framework for decision-making protocols, have to speak to your consents given around your purpose and your long-term plan. And there will be some that miss out, and there will be people around the table that won't be satisfied. But if you don't, you will actually end up trading it into an inevitable insolvency. Sounds dreadful, but affordability's, and Sharon knows that coming from the buller, that affordability pushes in a low decile area, it will start to push in a higher decile area sooner or later.
Great, thank you. Just a couple of things from me, which are probably more setting us up for success of all internal audit reports going forward. So this is the first, we have had some ad hoc independent assurance, but this is the first kind of review under a structured risk-based kind of program of assurance. Completely agree with what Bruce and Sharon said, that this is kind of first report. Management have accepted the findings. We now need to go away and remediate them. But I guess two things here is making sure that we capture all of these items in some kind of ageing findings report, spreadsheet or whatever it is. That's fine. But I'd quite like to see that in every hui that we have. So not my lesson of warning to management, but it's very easy to go, oh yeah, we agree with the above and we're going to do the above. But then Sonia's going to come knocking in 3 or 4 months' time and go, oh, you said you were going to do all of this. And then as the sponsor, you're going to go, So just make sure when you are, I am absolutely supportive of, our independent internal auditor needs to have an independent voice. They will present what they have found, they will present the risks. But management, at some times, we may receive some reports where management go, we understand what you've said, you've got your independent review, but we are not going to implement your recommendation. Or maybe we're only going to implement half of it because time, value, cost. In this time, at this case, we may accept the risk, which of course may create further korero. But I guess it's just my your lesson to management is that don't sign up for what you don't plan to implement, because what we don't want to happen is that Sonia's on her ageing open items, and it goes with Audit New Zealand's or Audit New Zealand's findings you probably do have to implement. And so we don't want them to be ageing. We don't want to be asking you in 6 months, 9 months' time, why haven't you done this? So make sure you always agree with or disagree with the findings that are in the report, and actually tell us what you're going to do, because I think a couple of those management comments were, yes, we'll implement it. So you've actually signed yourself up for a whole lot of work there. So, but that's just setting ourselves up for success. But no, great to have the first report off the board. And if there's no other further comments, maybe shall we move into the second report? Alison, are you? Oh.
I can kick things off. Or do you want to?
Next report.
Thanks, Annalisa. I think just by way of introduction in this one, and it's sort of going back to a bit of a theme in the conversation today, at the end of the long-term plan process, I think we as a team recognised, as did Audit New Zealand, that there was definitely scope for improvement in there. This report sits outside of the internal audit and programme of work, and we engaged Dave and his team to actually have a look at where there was scope for improvement, whether that be internally, capacity, capability, but also the governance structure as well. I mean, Dave will talk through the report in a wee bit more detail, and I think just noting Annalisa's comment on the last report, certainly what we will bring back to this committee going forward is that dashboard of all of our internal audit actions, all of the external audit actions, the time frame, where we're up to, what each action means, and who's delivering it. But I'll hand over to Dave to talk through the report.
I just want to start by commending management on proactively choosing to do this piece of work. It's very easy when you go through something as stressful as the last LTP to carry on looking forward. I think I never want to have anything to do with that again, or not until the next iteration. You know, as we set out in the exec summary of the report, there was general recognition that the process placed a lot of strain on staff. And so management want to understand, again, with a very forward-looking focus, what can we learn that we can apply to LTPs, other similar projects. And I think before we talk about those lessons learned, it's really important to acknowledge that the LTP got done despite everything, and that is, that reflects really positively on the way that all the staff pulled together and dealt with these issues and actually got the document finished. In terms of the findings, as with all these things, there's rarely one catastrophic event that causes this. It's a bunch of things, and the exec summary talks about 4 that we've highlighted. The poor implementation of the Magic performance module created real problems for people in terms of trusting the information they were getting. We highlighted some confusion over roles and responsibilities, governance arrangements being a bit informal, and then I think to do with lots of new staff, limited understanding of delivery outcomes. In terms of trying to distill those into key themes, we spoke to 27 people, so we got a really broad range of views, and we've distilled those into those 3 headings that you can see on page 3 of our report: ways of working, data collection and business process, and change management. And we've applied those across your kind of standard headings of governance, people, technology, and process. The ways of working talks to the roles and responsibilities, training and governance. The data collection and business process talks to getting those nuts and bolts right in terms of a single source of the truth, making sure processes are documented. And then that 3rd piece on change management talk is a kind of looking after your staff piece. That's all I wanted to say on the findings, other than it's really encouraging to see some of those have already been implemented with management's approach to the Local Water Done Well initiative in terms of the setting up a project governance group. So it's great that in this case they haven't just said, yes, we'll do it. They are actually doing it. So that's a good start. It's a good sign.
Right, thank you. Questions, comments? Bruce?
Again, another great opportunity here. I think you couldn't have picked probably 2 better projects to kick off an internal audit program. You know, that's really talk to the essence of what you're trying to achieve. One is how we collect our data, and the other one is how we prioritise the spend of it, kind of thing, right? I think that, and thanks, David, for the synthesis of it. I think there was a bit that intrigued me in the reading of it was the conversations you had around the consultation process eventually drove the outcomes in the plan. And I thought there was a bit missing there that you might have an opportunity to reflect on, Sharon and Sam, which is around, the conversation around promoting the purpose you guys have determined, because then consultation really relates to your leadership as opposed to them trying to, because picking out of it. I think if you're going to do it in the future, you could actually let the team, you would promote your kind of thinking on it and then allow people to respond to that, and everything gets a little clearer in terms of what you're trying to do, rather than that really difficult bit at the beginning saying, well, what's everyone saying here and what does all that mean? You're actually saying they're actually responding to our leadership. And that was a bit I thought that might be really useful in the future. So I thought really good report, really good opportunity. Want to really see how the next iteration works and how it all sort of kind of comes together. That will come with a more stable team. everything will improve with a more stable team the longer you guys run into it. You've got a bit of runway here. You don't have to attend to it immediately. Some of the other stuff you do, but this one I think you'll be able to, by the time you get round to doing this next, you would have been through your budgeting process and your annual accounting process, your budgeting, your planning 2 or 3 times before you get round to doing this, and it'll work a lot better. But really good opportunity to do this right now, and quite courageous, as you say, to do it. Because it did sort of open the wound a little bit, and everyone's going like sitting. But the good part about it is internal audit is an opportunity to learn. It's not an opportunity to blame. That's not what it's here for. It's an opportunity to actually get in there and say, right, we got, And the good part about it is, as a new team coming in, Alison and Sharon, is that you've got an opportunity to really improve on this. You're coming from if you were coming off a gold-plated service, you'd be thinking, how can we actually improve on that? Here you've got an opportunity, I think. And everyone can feel good about themselves as you work it out. So, yeah, good, and a good piece of work done.
Yeah, agree with that. A great piece of work done, very clear findings are good lessons learned. Great to hear that management's already implemented them with our current project. I just had one question. It was around, it was quite a wide interview group, actually like 27 key stakeholders. Just wondering, obviously they were all internal. For a review like this, would have there been any benefit to interview any external stakeholders to get a broader view, or are there any key, apart from going out to, obviously you can't go out to anyone in the community, but have you done a review like this at other times where there would be any benefit gained from any external stakeholders that would have had a voice or a view on how well we did it?
I think it comes down to the scope of the engagement. I think potentially yes. I think the focus here was on the process, and I think we initially had 8 or 9 people we were going to talk to, and that kept on increasing and kept on increasing and kept on increasing. But I think it was much more about how the organisation, the internal stuff worked to get it done. So it comes down to the objectives of the piece of work. I think there is an argument, if the objectives are slightly different, to seek views from external stakeholders.
Yeah, I guess it would just be in that consultation piece. Like if we were trying to get a view on how effective we were in consultation, then do you need the...
I think there's a real benefit in having that conversation if you do it again in, say, 3 years' time, but you would do it around how effective were we in communicating what we were trying to do, and how effective was the consultation process around what we were trying to do, because this time there didn't appear to be any clear leadership given. It was all a general consultation, but next time I know you're going to be a lot more focused about your outcomes and what you're trying to achieve and what your long-term expectations are. So it would be useful next time if you brought it in, because that will be how the community actually responds.
Great. Nothing more from... Oh, sorry. Sharon.
Yeah. Look, thank you. And I just want to thank the team. I want to thank David. This is new breaking ground for SDC. And what I would say is that, hopefully it'll give the risk and audit and councillors around the table and the wider council confidence around our desire to be really open and transparent about how we do business. We're not afraid to say when something hasn't gone quite right. We're not afraid to do quality improvement. We're not afraid to be just really open and transparent about what we're doing, and we will hold ourselves to account for delivering what we say we're going to do. And I'm just really delighted and proud of the team, and we look forward to keep progressing in this vein.
Chair, if I was talking to councillors, if they were all here, I'd be saying that change is iterative. Paradigm shifts don't really occur in my experience, right? So starting from where you are, you're going to change and improve, but you may not feel as though you are, and the management team needs to understand that as well. And it's really good opportunity to look back and say 6 years' time or 5 years' time and say where were we and where are we is a really good reflective conversation, because you will get better at this and better at this. There'll be other challenges, but I think you've got a really good line in the sand, you may not notice how you're boiling yourself until you've actually well cooked and it's going really well, and you wonder why you actually ever had a problem.
Thank you. Thank you, Deloitte. Thank you, David and team. See you next time. Oh, sorry. So, yes, can I receive that one as well? Can I have someone move the report on the long-term plan process? Thank you, Bruce and Sam. Thank you. All those in favour? Risk management. Oh, yeah.
Hello. Thank you, Madam Chair, for having us here to speak to the risk management update today. So I'm just going to talk a little bit at a high level before I hand over to Sonia to talk to you a little bit around the risk workshops. Once Sonia has finished that, further to request from the Audit and Risk Chair, Steve will speak to you around one of our developing strategic risks in terms of workforce planning and talk a little bit of detail around the drivers behind that risk and controls that are being investigated around management of that risk. So kicking off, this is the first probably substantive report I know since I've been in the seat for more than 2 weeks. So what you're seeing here is we brought you the risk framework in November for approval. That was adopted in December by Council. We have since that time gone out into the organisation and started engaging on the framework and the policy. We've run a series of six risk workshops with an aim of starting to define some strategic risks. What's probably come out of our engagement there is 2 things. One, we're trying to run at a really fast pace to put some artefacts in place around risk registers that is running up against everything else everybody is being asked to do at the moment, and then getting a cut through on the engagement has been a bit tough. The other thing what we're seeing is we're probably starting from a lower maturity level than what we had anticipated. What all that kind of comes together to say is we're taking a step back in light of that, and have taken a step back over the last thing. We've brought in an independent consultant who has risk, whose background has previously been head of risk at Sinlay. He's worked at PwC and now is out on his own. And we are working with him to actually go, how do we, 3 years from now, be a really competent risk-based organisation that uses risk as a strategic driver to drive our decisions? And how do we align a roadmap that actually acknowledges where we are, but puts some phases to actually lift that culture. So what we're delivering you today is the initial output of these strategic risk workshops with a big draft over the front of them, because what we're saying is we know there's a lot of work to do. We are going to continue to work towards some operational risk registers, because we think that at the moment that's some lower hanging fruit for us and where we can start to drive some change quicker. And we will continue to work with the business to develop this control basis and better define our strategic risks. But alongside that, what we will bring to you in May is and we're asking for endorsement for the development of a 3-year risk program that we can actually really start to look strategically around how we shift the culture rather than just working to a work plan. But on that note, that's a little bit of a waffle from me. So I'll hand to Sonia to talk to what the outcomes in these draft strategic risks.
Thank you, Julie. Over, November, December and January, we held a series of workshops with heads of departments and their ELT members. So these were focused on each group's key strategic risks that they were identifying. So the teams were involved, and we did pretty much a brainstorming session to identify those key risks. And then we consolidated those together and took to the ELT the key themes from those workshops, and then the ELT members pretty much chose what they thought were their top key strategic risks. And the outcomes or the outputs from those sessions are Appendix A that we've attached to our report there. So at the moment we are we've structured some risk descriptions there to try to focus on the key themes that we were all discussing in the workshops, and we've done an initial risk assessment, an inherent risk assessment. So this is without any controls in place, and that is our next phase, is that we'll be working with the heads of departments in ELT to identify what controls we do have in place, and then think about, well, what is the risk? Are we actually reducing the risk level by having those controls? Are they effective? And then what else do we need to be doing? So it's still quite a long process to be working on these strategic risks. Steve is going to talk to, I believe, risk 7, the resource planning and management. So I will hand over to Steve. Thank you.
Thanks, team. So I guess one of the key focuses for the organisation is doing our basics well, and that's one of the Chief Executive's tasks for her ELT, to make sure that we can get our systems right. The risk that we've identified and the team have identified across the organisation is we don't necessarily have the right tools and systems in place for a really effective resource planning and management. And when we look at this structure at the moment, this is the assessment of likelihood and consequence without any controls in place, or with ad hoc controls, which is probably what we've got at the moment. Why do we see this as a risk? Is because I think if you reflect on the previous LTP and our current LTP, that the rate and the scope of change between those two 10-year plans is quite significant, and that represents both an organisation responding to its community's needs and wants, and an organisation internally trying to resource itself and plan to deliver those levels of service. So I guess what we're now doing in terms of mitigating this and trying to pull these numbers down, both from a likelihood and a consequence, is we are running through a number of changes in our organisation in the way in which we manage the risk, noting that we now have identified it. You'll see things like, regularly reporting our people data, coming to this Audit and Risk Committee and presenting you information around FTE, headcount, exit strategies, our recruitment approach, our success there, our role around performance development. These are all things that are about effective workforce management. We're also, with the establishment of our new head of people role, looking at a people strategy for our organisation, which will serve to put in place a resource planning approach that doesn't exist in a structured, planned manner at the moment. And so when we see, cumulative new programs and things that we do on an annual or a long-term basis, is how do we make sure we can map the consequence across the entire organisation, not just within individual work areas and individual groups. And that's a bit of work that the people team will be leading with the exec and the heads of departments. We're also needing to make sure that we have effective role design, and that touches on a previous point made around, and that's reflected in some of the exit survey data, around ensuring that we are keeping our jobs current with the job requirement. And also, and to Bruce's point, it's not just looking at the functions of the job, but it's the capability, experience and skill set required of the people in that job that's really important for us. That then talks to some degree of change management as we continue to grow and evolve with our community. How do we continue to internally change the way in which we operate and plan and structure ourselves? Again, these are some of those things that are at the moment done, but done to some degree in isolation and within a group focus, not an organisation-wide focus, and that's the role of the people team to establish that resource planning opportunity. The other thing, and probably the final thing I can do to say what are we doing to mitigate this risk at the moment, is it's around ensuring that we continue to train, and I talked about this earlier, our leaders to have good performance conversations, to have regular one-on-ones, to be able to talk to the team, to create alignment between our vision of future Cell and be able to bring that down through a logical sequence of work plans from an LTP to an annual plan to a quarterly work plan to an individual work plan, and how we create that line of sight at the moment. And so in the summary, I think we're working towards this, but it is, to a degree, we are building the plane as we're flying it. That's why the risk at the moment, as noted, is likely, and that the consequence of us not doing this is major, because we are continually having to, we're behind the 8 ball, and what we want to do as an organisation by the end of this year is put in place some steps to get us at least in front of this work plan, so as we lead into a next long-term plan, we do have an effective way to mitigate against this risk and bring those scores down.
That's it from us. Happy to hand back to you, Madam Chair.
Bruce.
Quick comment for you, Steve. Being behind at the moment, funny enough, I'm finding in organisations that actually haven't got around to doing something about something is a massive advantage, because of the rate of change going on out there with new AI tools and things like that. You actually aren't embedded in a change which is, from a systems perspective, extraordinarily expensive. Easiest way to explain something is tell you about something that's going on in my life is that I'm on board of a tech company. We were compiling a certain kind of go-to-market strategy, which we threw out in December and completely changed the business. And by January, we were something else. And that was through the development of an AI tool that enabled us to stop doing something which was to accumulate global templates and actually go to a template writing system, which was an extraordinary shift in the business. And what we found is that we didn't need to research the market a lot. We just went to market with what we've got, and we watched whatever was succeeding and whatever was failing. So it was a complete paradigm shift in business. You guys have got access, it occurs to me, to an enormous amount of data accumulated in various places. The tools that are available to you today will actually enable you to mine that. They're calling it a data lake, but call it what you like, right? You can mine that at quite a low cost to the organisation. Historically, you might have had to spend $800,000 developing code to actually interrogate that. Now it's available to you freely online, and you can do that. So I think that your capacity to mine that data will enable you to move and shift your risk really quickly. If you can do that quickly, your productivity outputs will be huge and you'll get a real advantage. So, that's kind of, and that's that sort of dynamic. We've all got to learn to change, because those that change quickly and embrace it will get a massive advantage quickly. And I was kind of thinking when I was sitting here, you said, we might be behind the eight ball. Well, I thought, that's funny enough, someone's going to say to you, that's a really good position to be in, because you don't have to do what they're doing. When you hear that Apple and Microsoft are just firing 20,000 program, engineers in favour of AI development, you're working out that things are moving. So one of your key risks is failing to do that, because if you don't, you will lose the opportunity and someone will take it from you somehow. Whether, I don't know what it is, but it's more likely to be resources, access to resources, and access, and dynamic change.
Just a couple of things from me. I went through, I'm like as you know, some kind of bird attracted to shiny things when you give me a risk register, because I have waited 5 years for this strategic risk register. So first of all, ka pai mahi for delivering a strategic risk register to the Audit and Risk Committee. So that's the first thing. So I'm not going to be a bird to a shiny thing, but maybe just, and I am always a strong advocate that this is your risk register. It's actually almost the chief executive and the senior leadership team's risk register. So, we will all have views on what the biggest risks are for this organisation. But at some point, maybe when you take draft off it, we might be able to spend, maybe have a bit more time or a half an hour just to have the opportunity for us as Audit and Risk Committee members, obviously, and sitting on other councils and councillors to give some feedback into we think those risks are quite on the money kind of thing. So I won't go there. But yeah, congratulations on actually getting it up. So, any other comments on that? Otherwise, we might keep moving. So if I could have someone move the management report. Thank you, Sam. Bruce, all those in favour? Aye. Aye. Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Sonia. Treasury. Home straight. Oh, right. Okay.
Good afternoon. This should be a quick one, though. Just like to note that this report is with regards to the quarter ending 31st of December, and we're almost at the next quarter, so just wanted to iterate that. As of 31st of December, we had a debt level of $215 million with a on-call facility of $10 million that we haven't utilised. It is pretty quick to gain access to that. We can do it on the day. So that's a little bit of an overdraft facility that we do have access to. We have $16 million or had $16 million in cash or cash equivalents available. And in terms of our liquidity ratio, which is the ability to use current assets to extinguish current liability, we are still compliant with our internal policies. If I just go to the second last slide, I'm aware there's been some questions through the Local Water Done Well consultation process about our fixing of debt and interest rate swaps. So just wanted to draw your attention to the slide on page 389, where we disclose that as of 31st of December, our interest rates are fixed to 72%. So we have 72% interest rate swaps fixed. And in terms of our borrowing with the LGFA, we have about 90% floating. So that is to mitigate the risk of the floating lending rates. We have fixed interest rate swaps. And then just the last item in terms of the payback ratio. So of our policy, our Treasury policy states that we shall retain a ratio of under 9 years. So as with the draft annual report for the June 2024 period, it was calculated at 14 years. We just wanted to reiterate that it does not form part of the LGFA government compliance process, and it is still in line with the LTP, but we expect that to come back down to under 9 years in the 2027-2028 financial year. Any questions?
Sam?
Yeah. If you could just restate the borrowing fixed versus floating, because it's been quite a major conversation in our submissions to the Local Water Done Well piece, and it doesn't seem like the answer is a one sentence answer that then everyone's happy with. So if you could just say that again, and probably for Nicole and my benefit as much as anything, Nicole, is we'll no doubt get asked next week, on Wednesday, sorry, about this piece.
Sure. So we have fixed and floating debt fixed over the next 7 years up to 2031. And as at 31st of December 2024, 90% of the borrowing was at floating rates. And then we have interest rate swaps to mitigate that risk, fixed interest rate swaps to the value of 72% of our total debt to mitigate that risk.
I think, Sam, just adding to that as well, and I might just send this round Within our Treasury policy, we've got a very clear definition around what, and the timing as well, around what we can and cannot fix and what we should and shouldn't have in floating. And I think just now having the percentage that we've got in that space benefits us with where interest rates are just now. So to have everything fixed, we would be cutting ourselves short. But that mix will change. So I sort of refer to it as a hybrid. It's always going to be a balance between what is fixed and floating. Floating works to our advantage just now based on the rates, and where we are just now is in keeping with our Treasury policy. But I think just based on the comments that have come out of Local Water done well, I will circulate that extract for our Treasury policy because it is quite clear in there what the definitions are as well.
I was actually just I only had one question that actually related to the Treasury policy, so it might be quite a high level question, Alison, but given decisions that get made in the next couple of weeks is obviously going to prompt changes to our policy. And
yeah, I mean, I think Neil sort of talked to that payback ratio. I mean, that has no impact on LGFA, but one thing I would say is our Treasury policy is quite conservative. So depending on whatever decisions are made, we will have to revisit our own Treasury policy in terms of whatever working capital fund we would have to provide. And that might have a flow-on effect into some other areas as well. We have had a number of conversations with LGFA around what that borrowing would look like for us, and also if a CCO was to be established, what it would look like for them as well.
okay, can I please have someone move and second the... Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Sam. All those in favour? Right, great.
So, as Julie's making her way to the table and the microphone, so this is a very quick update that also includes our Lagoima update. So we'll just work through some of these details really quickly. Pass over to you, Julie. Thanks.
Hi, thanks for having me back again. So I've got Jodie Becker with me today. Jodie won't be speaking, but we're just here to answer any questions if we have on the delegations of authority or policy work streams. So, as Steve said, this is our first copy of the legal and policy report as requested at the November meeting, where we have wrapped up a generalised legal update, our policy update, and our Lagoima update into one report and kept them at a little bit of a higher level. That said, if this report isn't delivering what we're hoping it'll deliver, I'm happy to take that feedback and come back with a slightly recut report in May. So I won't go through the full detail of the report, but just giving you running through the top lines. We, as of January this year, have a fully fledged legal function embodied in council now. Our two senior counsel came on board. They have chomped through an amazing amount of work in a very short period of time. For the purposes of the Audit and Risk Committee, what that means is they are getting out, they are engaging with our organisation, and they are helping to lift the capacity of our people to identify legal risk in particular, but also commercial risk where they identify it, and working with them to grow a culture where we are able to deal with this more internally and manage risks before they start to arise and look around corners a little bit better. So really pleased with how that's all going. What we have also been able to do is actually start to roll out at an ad hoc basis at the moment, but it's in development of a full plan, a training program around statutory compliance, which speaks directly to ARC's terms of reference. So far, we've managed to address some key areas, including privacy, Lagoima principles. We are looking at making sure that we're doing our construction contracts well, and that our project management team, capital projects team, are supported in understanding how we put good contracts together and then how we use them really effectively to council's benefit. And we are also going to be moving into starting with the communications team initially local government consultation principles, and then starting to look at how we roll out a better training program throughout council on good local government decision making as well, to kind of start to grow and make sure that we're doing that better. There are no formal claims on foot that we're aware of at the moment. There's one that's potentially in the wings, but any exposure would be likely to be under 100 grand, and we don't believe that there's a significant chance of success of that claim if it were to come to fruition. The big thing, the last probably thing to be aware of just from a legal perspective is we are building a system to look at what legislative change is coming down the pipeline. But I guess what I would say on what I'm seeing, what the team are seeing, is the fire hose of legislative reform has only just the tap's been slightly turned on. It's going to come a lot quicker and a lot faster over the next 12 months as this government tries to push through everything that it had set out on its agenda quickly before. I went to a Taituara risk conference last week where they spoke to what was on the legislative horizon. I think they had something like 45 pieces of legislation that are relevant to local government that are on the horizon. Key among these are the Public Works Act changes, the fast track consenting, which Bob's team's already working on, the upcoming massive overhaul of the Resource Management Act, which they are thinking will be introduced before the end of the year. And also what it was communicated last week is the word is that the bill for the for the restructuring of the local government sector is likely to be introduced mid-year. So what that will actually contain, we don't know. But that's also coming down the pipeline as well. So as we kind of start to get a few more details, we'll continue to just report to this committee that's coming. In terms of Lagoima, top line is that the team have done really well. If we look back at where we are 12 months ago, where we had 22% of all requests were not being completed on time since the last Audit and Risk Committee, all requests have either been completed or compliantly extended within the statutory period. So we're out of the danger zone that we were in around compliance on Lagoima. So a big congratulations to the team on that. We have also taken some steps around focusing on continuous improvement, on doing a self-assessment using the Ombudsman's tool. There wasn't a lot of surprise that came out of the outcome of that. What we know is we've got issues with our digital systems, which means access to records. We're working on it and the team are working on everything there. We know we've got to continue to grow our capability in this space, and we know that we need to do better public access. So we need to start looking at proactive release. We need to put systems in place for publishing our Lagoimas, and all that work is in train at the moment, but I won't go too much into detail there. Ombudsman complaints, there were 4 Ombudsman complaints since November. These all basically relate to legacy issues or a neighbour not liking another neighbour. And from that, so we had no adverse findings for any of those against us. I won't go fully into the policy review other than to say that it's continuing to move on, and there's a full line on the non-delegations there as well. So I'll leave it at that. And hand back to you, Madam Chair.
I have one comment, Julie. If there is a firm in town that can take 196 instructions and get it all done for $370,000, then point me at them, because in reality, that's a very, very low number. I would imagine this cost is significantly higher if you'd instructed. No, certainly proving your weight there. I think you're being very modest. It'd be 3 times that value. And some firms it'd be 4, in my experience. So well done.
Yeah, just from a great report, Julie. Nice to see it all together in one kind of legal update report with everything in there. Having sit on a couple of other councils, the Lagoima is hard and can get really messy and really time consuming. So it's big numbers, but great that we got kind of on top of that. And interesting to see how you will go on the journey of when you've built a team, kind of creating that customer-centric kind of legal shared service offering, and whether, you know, the rest of the kaimahi and the organisation come to you, as opposed to, it's almost rather than being the ambulance at the bottom of the shift and telling you what they have done, rather than asking, but I'm sure as you kind of carry on with that journey and building your team, then it'll only get better and better. So.
My team are actually reporting to me at the moment that the roadshow might have gone too well, and that everybody, we are, and it's this credit to the ELT support as well, and that we are already seeing that they're not having to be the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, and they are getting to be at the top already. So we're really lucky.
Kapai. Sam. Sorry, Sam.
My contribution is just around the Lagoima piece, and looking over the last 3 years, the high in every year is around the time we're talking about our annual plan or long-term plan. So like we're generating a lot of interest in the community about the things we're either sharing or people feel we're not sharing enough of to begin with. I think key for us to think about how we do this well next year and the year after, like as we work through this. But we've got 206 people that have, or different requests. Is that, have you broken it down to understand, is that like 150 different people? So like there's a huge range and everyone's just asking one question, or are there 5 people or organisations asking 60% of the questions? And the second piece is, what ability do we have to cover the cost of replying to all of these Lagoimas?
So I'll take the first one first. We can definitely do some breaking down and say we know that we have 5 individuals who are repetitive. We've got that data. What we are not getting is a lot of the same question. So we're not being able to repeat it as a lot of individual responses, which is probably why I say it comes to a general rise in the interest that people have in the business of what we're doing, because it is coming from everywhere. But there are certain individuals that do ask more questions than the others. And what we can say is, I can kind of say how many were repetitive and how repetitive without identifying individuals. I can bring that reporting. In terms of how we can recover costs, the Ombudsman has been very clear that the ability to recover costs is very, very limited. It is, and there's not a line of thumb. So some councils say 2 hours. The Ombudsman would say that's a bit low. So what we're trying to do is, rather than say we're going to start charging you and put ourselves in the firing line, is trying to work, and the whole council's doing this, is work better with requesters when we get large requests and saying, what are you looking to know? Can we be some more helpful to help you refine that request down? We'll spend less time on the resourcing and you'll get a better answer.
I just think we could also start charging it 2 hours and wait to be told something different. It feels like this is a huge amount of organisational effort goes into doing this, and we should do it well, and it's public information and we should make that available. But if we've gone to the effort of trying to help people refine their request to be specific about what they really need, if that specific request is going to take more than 2 hours, then I think there's a case for saying there's some contribution here.
What I would say too is that we're also recognising that we're not publishing Lagoimas on our website in the way that we would like to. And that's a piece of work, and that's good practice, so that all of our community can see relevant Lagoimas, so that they can have the opportunity to read, etc. But I have to say, I do have to agree with Julie, having been through an Ombudsman's practice review, the Ombudsman's threshold of seeing charges is not particularly palatable. I don't know if the new Ombudsman will have a different flavour and view on that, but certainly the outgoing Peter Bouchier was very reluctant to say, and I've seen instances where councils have been overturned in terms of charging. So the better way forward is to try and work with the individual asking to create a narrower view. I would also say, from a digital point of view, Sam, some of our key challenges is that our systems and processes do not lend themselves to finding information easily. And that's part of our challenge, is that it's a very manual process, which is why investment into digital is really critical, so that we can move forward with things electronically, so that we should be able to find things at a push of a button, rather than somebody having to wade through 25 A4 folders.
Goodbye, thank you. If someone moves the legal update report, thank you, Sam. Seconder, Bruce, all those in favour? Right, development update. Lucky last. Almost four. We almost did it. Almost.
Good afternoon. Unfortunately, Emma Larson, Head of Planning, couldn't be here today. She's unwell, so I'll try to fill her boots and talk about the planning side of things. Murray England can talk about the engineering side of things. So take the report as read, but I guess some of the highlights from it is that we have received record levels of applications, particularly resource consents, and it's not just the only touch point when you do talk about development. There's numerous other touch points across both planning, building and engineering across the whole of council. So if it is really high volumes within the resource consents, it's also high volumes elsewhere. It's the same people processing and providing comments across the board. So I guess given those high volumes, it's put quite a bit of strain on our systems and our people, which has meant our statutory timeframes have suffered somewhat. The report does detail a lot of the reasoning behind that, also the actions that we've put into place to date, but also the actions that we still need to put in place as well. So we haven't finished the job. There's still more work to be done there, and we're fully cognizant of that and own that. And we are putting those extra actions in place to rectify the situation. I think it's key to note that we are issuing more decisions than we're receiving applications. So we are on top of the problem, and as we go through over time, we will get through that backlog. When looking at those timeframes of applications lodged after 1st of November, we are achieving a timeframe compliance of 94% with an average working days of 16 days. So the newer applications are being turned around quickly, as they should, but some of the older applications are still in the system, so that legacy glut is still there, and that will continue to have effect on our statutory timeframes. Murray, do you want to talk about the engineering?
Yeah, well, I think the same can be replicated for engineering. One of the biggest changes going forward is the number of staffing that has been brought on board. We often talk about staffing and what does that really mean? Well, it actually means a number of things. It means about capacity for our team, it means resilience, and it means depth. So as we have brought our extra staff on board, which have approved through the LTP, it has freed us up to get a lot more work done. That's what happens when you add more capacity. It also allows for resilience, whereas in the past you just have a couple of people sick and the whole team falls over. The extra staff has allowed that resilience come through. And possibly the most important part of that is the depth of the team. So instead of having a flat structure of development engineers or processing applications, we now have a depth of structure of senior engineers who can now help the review process. As before that was reliant on the development engineering manager to do that work. So there's a number of benefits of bringing those staff on board. So we've increased from 5 up to 11. That will be of the 7th of April. We'll have a full team of people, which is really exciting. And as those staff members come on board, it frees the team up to allow for a number of innovations. And we're starting to see that already with updates to our website, providing online forms, application forms, standard reports and bits and pieces, putting in place a dedicated duty engineer so they can take phone calls from our development community. When we have applications come through, they are able to vet those for completeness, triage those based on complexities, and allocate those to the appropriate staff, which has been a real huge push forward. We ran a workshop with the development community in October last year, and there was a number of really great forward-focused improvements we could make, and some of those around our bylaws. So blanket approvals under our bylaws have now been approved, I should say, for multi-unit developments. That's a new kind of development that's happening in Selwyn, whereas in past it used to be one lot, one house, very simple. Now it's one lot, 3 houses or more, which has provided a lot of complexity in terms of engineering approval processes. And this blanket bylaw approvals have allowed for multiple connections. So I'm not sure if this is making too much sense, but has allowed for us to approve multiple connections per lot, which means that we can have an individual connection for each dwelling, as opposed to people building and then trying to apply for additional connections afterwards through a resource consent process. We've streamlined that. So there's a number of innovations that have occurred, and we see a lot more coming into the future.
Questions? Comments? It was interesting. Interesting paper, interesting korero for me. Kind of summarising its systems and people, isn't it? I get keeping up with the pace and keeping ahead of the curve. So, if I was Santa Claus, which would it be? Would it be systems or people? Like what at the moment? What's the biggest hurdle, or what would be the biggest benefit?
I'd speak for Murray and probably say systems. So I think we're in very much a digital deficit, as we've spoken about before numerous times at council, where we're operating off very manual systems that don't talk to each other. So all the processes are completely misaligned. They don't talk to each other. There's no single view of the customer. There's no single tracking of an application through a whole journey. Systems.
I'm just going to say that's exactly what I said before. We've got a finite amount of money. We've had to prioritise what we're putting into place. One thing we have learned, though, is that even if we had more money and we could put lots of systems in place all at the same time, actually people have a finite capacity to be able to deliver the systems because it falls back onto the same people. There are financial implications. So I would rather that we took our time, we implemented something and we did it well and it was embedded well into the organisation than trying to do lots with a very short space of time. And we, we saw that from the magic, and we're not going to repeat that. So, it's slow and steady.
No, I won't comment on that. Just be alive to the opportunity that's being presented, though, with the shift in tech. Because by waiting a little while, you may get a massive shift in productivity out of AI. It's incredible. So long as the data lake's there, your interrogation systems will become, to compile your own is going to be pretty incredible.
We've got our first AI policy, and we will be using AI in the organisation. So we're excited at the opportunities that we've got.
Just in relation to one, we were looking at this is another organisation, we're looking at a piece of software, or building a piece of software which was going to take 6 months and cost us 800,000. We built it in 24 hours using Claude GPT. And that was just a massive change in productive outcomes, and got 90% of the capacity out of it. So you guys are going to be able to, with movement, by not doing it now, you may have actually placed yourself in a position where you might receive a big productivity shift. So keep nagging your chief executive to be able to interrogate it through these particular products.
And a seconder, please, for the development timeline update report. Thank you, Nicole. Sam, second. All those in favour? Aye. A mover and seconder moving into PX, please. Mover and a seconder, Sam. Thank you. All those in favour? Ohuia, te pō, ke watea, e he kua watea.